Hello, and it's another week of the Property Lifestyle Mastery Podcast Season 2 with me, Jackie Tomes. And on this show, we are having open and honest conversations about investing in property in a way that ultimately creates freedom and cash flow. So we're talking about the highs, the lows, and the lessons along the way in investing in property, and also being able to go on holiday a load alongside it. And the topic of today's discussion is deal killers. What are the biggest things that destroy deals either upfront or along the way? Hey, we've made a load of mistakes. We've seen other people, by working and mentoring with them, the mistakes that they've made, and here we are distilling those killer things that we wish someone had told us. So we're going to be talking about how finance costs can actually cost you way more than you're putting in your budget, how refurb budgets can be a bit sneaky and come and cause you problems, and why all money out deals can actually cause you cash flow issues. So a fantastic episode ahead. You're really going to love this. So here is myself and Detail Dave.
Hello.
Another week, another episode. And this week we are talking about the biggest deal killers. So we're looking at kind of two different perspectives around where people maybe talk themselves out of doing deals that they think can't work, but actually they could. And then also the other perspective of how people kill deals through the process of actually doing them, and they maybe become not so great as we thought they might have been in the first place. So where should we start?
Let's just start with the upfront deal killers.
Yeah.
I think this comes down to a lot of people. It is hard to find deals. It can be, especially at certain times in the market. It can be very difficult to find deals, but I find it amazing how quite often people are saying they can't find any deals, but then I'll look at their analysis and it's like, this is absolutely fine. What you're looking at here is a deal. You're just missing all this kind of perspective on it, because in essence there is especially earlier on, I would say, in your property investment career, there's a sense of fear that you don't necessarily notice, and I would say people call it being cautious or just being sensible, or I just want to be
Totally sure.
Yeah, I just want to make sure it's definitely fine. Like, these are the sentiments that are said, but in reality what it means is you end up in the analysis putting conservative numbers all over the place. The conservative deal killer. And that I've seen that so often where I'm just looking through a deal and asking questions about the numbers. It's like, oh, well, I just thought I'd be safe. I just thought I'd go conservative on that. The biggest ones are obviously end values. That's an obvious one.
Rents.
And end rents. If those two as a starting point, if you go average rent, average end value,
And high refurb.
and then you add a load of extra cost on your refurb because you're trying to be safe, you've now basically killed the deal straight away. It's like saying, I'm deciding I'm probably going to go out there and be really average, a really kind of, average Joe property investor, and I'm going to do a really average job, and it's all going to go average, and somehow you want to find great deals, but deals aren't.
You have to be better.
You have to be better than average. That's the job. That's what we're in this for, right? So it's like, for me, that thing of, I call it realistic, not conservative.
Yes.
I'm saying every time someone says, I just want to be a bit, sensible or conservative, I'm just saying, no. I want to know what's the real number. What do you actually think in a sensible market that you will achieve on this? And that, I can tell you, across the board, is never the average. So anyone who says, well, I was looking at the rents and they were somewhere between 600 and 800 or 600 and 900, so I went 700 or 750 because it's right, it's the average rent for the area. I'm like, what are you?
Well, why have you just done a refurb?
Why have you done a refurb? Are you not the best thing on the market? Like, what is this? Like, you comparing yourself with the crap on the market? No, the job is be the best.
But I think these are worthy thoughts for people to have, right? Like, you don't just want to just be, glass half full and just hope that everything's going to be good, because those people who do that also, they're going to kill the stuff later. But I think that's just why for us it's just such a simple concept of just looking at your deals from a best, likely and worst case scenario was such a game changer for us, because it means that you right, let's just be really pessimistic for like half an hour here and think about all the risks and all the stuff that could go wrong and how bad it could look, and then let us dream for half an hour. I'm saying half an hour.
It's not half an hour.
Five
That's
minutes.
ridiculous.
5 minutes. And maybe the first time it's half an hour. A few minutes, and then decide how good it could be, and then let's just go somewhere in the middle on kind of like, in all likelihood it's not going to go that well. all that badly, so let's go to this. And that really shifted, because we talked ourselves out of so many deals for probably, I remember like quite clear, like maybe like a 9-month period where we were really struggling to secure deals, which was partly because we were trying to do too many things, and therefore we couldn't be really clear on what the best and likely really was. But then once we started doing this best, likely, worst, it just give a lot more perspective, right?
Yeah, and I would say, just for clarity, best, likely, worst is not to be interpreted as top price, average price, worst price, right? It really is, like, for me, likely case is what I call realistic. It's where I'm looking at the market going, my property is going to be, after refurb, of the similar quality to these ones in the top 10%. Therefore, I'm pricing it in the top 10%. That's realistic. And then, yes, worst case scenario, I have a valuer walk in who's a bit of an asshole. It doesn't see that and decides the market's worse and gives me closer to the average. And that's worst case scenario. And a worst case scenario is not, well, there is a property on the market that's like 100k and all the others are 150 and the top of the 200. So worst case scenario, I'll get the 100k. No, that's not the worst case scenario. That's idiocy.
So it's realistic, pessimistic.
Yeah, exactly. it's like, yeah, if I'm the top 10% of the market and a valuer walks in, the worst case scenario for me is he's going to give me the average value for the area. He's going to say 2 beds in this area are on average 150 grand, so I'm giving 150. It's like I ignore the 200k ceiling price.
Yes.
And you're thinking it's going to be like 190, right? Your worst case is the average. So just this view of it, where you're not just killing deals because you're being really
scared.
That's what it comes down to. Fear of what could go wrong. But it's just, unfortunately, there is a risk in property that anything can happen, right? And
well, I guess there's a risk with anything. Even if you just like, I'm working a job, there's a risk that you turn up to work today and you get made redundant.
That's true.
Like, but you can't live your life just like thinking that that's going to be the scenario. Like, you know, the probability is that, you know, things are fine. I probably am going to have a job at this company for the next 2 years. Like, you can't live your life just always looking at the worst case scenario. So it's the same with the deals.
Yeah, and it's the same with interest rates. You know, they're changing all the time. They're literally always changing. So, like, talking to your broker and being really clear up front about what are the interest rates right at the moment is the first job. But then I always go realistic. I start looking down the line and I start looking 12 months ahead. And I say, where are they heading? You know, right now in the market in the UK, when we're recording this right now, Bank of England base rate is being pegged to go downwards. That is just across the board, all news, everything coming from Bank of England, and we had a drop literally yesterday. And they're still saying there's more to come, and all the lenders have reduced their rates. And I'm saying to myself, okay, if I'm analysing a deal right now for, say, 6 months refinance down the line in 6 months, I can probably assume we're going to be at the current rates or less. Okay? Current rates or less. So in a way, my worst case scenario is current rates.
Yes.
And possibly, I want a likely case, might even consider putting it down by 0.25. You know, that's because I'm looking ahead to the future based on the current now and making a hypothesis on what the market's going to do. And definitely it's en route towards better than it is now. So yeah, you know, if you're being, my idea of conservative in that scenario is to say it will still be the same in 6 months' time. That would be a conservative approach for likely case. Oh, it's 6.7% now, so it's going to be 6.7%. Then everything suggests it's not going to be. So, but you know, that would be fine for me if I saw someone's analysis and they said, well, it's the broker's saying it's going to be 6%, so I've put 6%. So that's probably okay, you know. But you haven't been too harsh. You're not going to kill a deal with that.
It's making me think. Actually, it's a really good conversation, because I feel like as we're talking about this, I'm like, my God. It just is highlighting to me again how many variables there are. There's all the variables within the deal, within the people, within the market. Like, all of this stuff is like happening and it's moving and changing all the time. And I think if you will kill your deal if you don't have some way to be plonking this information down somewhere, to do some thinking, to make an educated guess, because that is all of this is educated guesses, and to put it down, because I think people kill deals by trying to hold all of this in their heads, and it becomes a swirling vortex of variables and chaos and pessimism and what my Aunt Mildred said. But if you were like, okay, I'm going to think about it, like you just said, like, okay, there's this line item, interest rate. Bit of a think about this, likely, best case, worst case, put it in there. Stop thinking about it. Next line item, builders. Here's where we're at with builders. My builder messed me around last time, so it could be that I need a new builder and they could be more expensive. But never think about this. Put some sensible numbers down. And I think if you don't do that, and because really, how many line items do you reckon there are on our analyzer?
I mean, hundreds when you add it all together. When you add everything, the purchase costs, the finance elements, the interests, the refinance costs, the rental elements, like
okay, so hundreds,
a lot.
So hundreds of variables, and we have to somehow make educated guesses in the midst of all of these variables. And if you don't have some way of getting that information out of your head and onto a page that you can then analyse and make sense of, you will do nothing. And that won't be the reason that you give yourself. You'll be sitting going, it's because of all the variables, I don't have somewhere to put them down, like Jackie said. It will be because you're like, there are no deals. That will be what you say. But it's actually not truth. It's like, you need to fucking sit your ass down in front of a computer and make yourself a good spreadsheet to put this in, because if you don't have it, it's not going to work.
Yeah, and knowing that, like I always espouse the best, likely, worst methodology, because it gives you somewhere to put those fears in. And it gives you somewhere to put those optimisms in as well, because sometimes it's like, well, it's going to be really great, and there are some properties really high, so how do I account for that? Well, shove it in the best case. It's really good, and you just get it down there, 3 different options, and you get to see what's the range, and somewhere in the middle is where it's likely to be, and it really helps, and then you feel confident in it and ready to go.
And then I think part of this is also the risk level with different kinds of models, because if you I feel like some people look at single let deals that maybe don't even have a refurb and want the same level of profit margin as someone who's maybe doing a massive conversion. That's not right. Like, the risk level with a commercial conversion is massive, and there are way more variables that can go wrong with that than just doing a single let. So therefore, you can stomach something with lower overall returns on a single let, because the odds are, probability, it's more likely to go your way than something with far more variables. So therefore, like, making sure that within the context of the opportunity that you're looking at, you're being realistic on what is a fair profit margin.
Very important word, that, realistic, today.
Yes, it is. We're so exciting, us. Jackie and Dave had a really good realistic podcast.
But you're completely right. Like, if you're looking at a simple model, you've got to make the model work with lower overall returns generally. Like, you're not going to be able to easily replicate an unbelievable return on a simple buy-to-let. It might happen occasionally. You might get the occasional great deal, just a motivated seller, a particularly low market value purchase.
A happy valuer on refinance.
Yeah, occasionally it happens and you just get this very sweet deal happen. But as a replicable model that you're trying to scale up and do more of, so that you can actually be an investor and have a business, you have to have a realistic level of profit margin. And you're right, like, there's a reason in particular that higher risk projects, it's not just that they're bigger and better and therefore because of that make better returns. It's also the flip side of that coin is they're bigger and have to have better returns. Because
there's a good chance you're going to mess it up.
And that's the thing, right? What no one ever talks about is the amount of projects that don't go to plan, and if you haven't got a good enough margin on your complex commercial conversion, then it gets eaten into so quickly and you head down to no profit
or minus.
And the job is just to keep working through the project to keep that up as high as possible, but you need enough margin to be able to weather problems in those, and there's more problems in the commercial conversion. Simple as. And
I'm just thinking back at the overview of our project. I've never quite looked at it in this way, but just like, we've done some larger scale projects, and probably on balance, our smaller, poxy little things have generally done better.
The less risk, the more profit, in theory.
For us personally, yes. And maybe it's different for someone who's coming into it with like a load of experience. But obviously most of us are coming into property having to build up our experience. But I'd even argue some people with more experience, you could be very experienced in like one capacity, maybe working for a large house builder, but that doesn't mean that you know all the pieces of the puzzle, that you come in as a basically entrepreneurial person doing your first commercial conversion where you're responsible for everything. You don't know all the pieces of the puzzle, maybe how the finance works. So actually, I'm not sure I might have to take that back.
Well, I guess that comes down to another aspect of what makes a deal killer, I would say, is trying to do deals that are beyond your current level of, too far beyond. I'd say you can push yourself a little bit. It's trying to do something that's too far beyond your current level of expertise and capability. Yeah. And I think that comes down to this belief system that could be espoused by various people that, for example, a commercial conversion is just a buy-to-let with more noughts, which is the biggest lie I've ever heard in my life. But it can be espoused like that and make people believe that is only a small step outside of their comfort zone. Most likely scenario is if you've only done a buy-to-let and you don't have any other experience and you move to a commercial conversion, the first one you do of those will not make much profit because you're going to miss a load of things. That's the most likely scenario and what I've seen happen the most often. And it's not that necessarily it'll be a massive disaster, but just that it won't go to plan and that you will have a hard time pulling that project through to a successful completion that doesn't lose you money, basically, right?
Yes, yep.
And that's job number one, is to basically go through that and learn those things. But if you're there trying to make deals like that work and you're sitting there going, well, I just need to make a bit massive commercial conversion work and I've never done it before, you're going to be running deal after deal after deal after deal and not making anything work. And that's going to delay you and it's going to kill all your deals because you don't know enough yet.
Can I just be really boring again and bring it back to realism?
Yeah.
Because I feel like there's, on balance, if you don't believe in yourself at all and you're scared of everything, you are not going to do anything. And what the property training industry does a pretty good job of is bolstering our potential confidence and self-belief, which we do need to do, because if you don't believe in yourself at all, you aren't going to do anything. So someone helping you to feel more confident in yourself to go for it is going to take you from not doing anything to maybe doing something. But the problem is, if you already have a certain amount of self-belief and you sit in a room and you hear the same spiel, potentially it's going to take you from being probably realistic in your abilities to being a bit deluded in your abilities and how easy it's going to be. So therefore I think you swing too far the other way, and I think probably we fell into that second camp of we have always been confident to go out and just put ourselves out there even if we don't know how. And I heard too much of the rhetoric of it's not that hard, you can do this, you can go for it, like woo woo woo, and therefore you just start to think, oh yeah, it's only a commercial conversions to refurb with more zero, so you just go for it, but you've lost the reality of your current capabilities and experience.
Yeah. And I'd say with all of this, it's not a matter that you're never going to get there for sure. It's just a matter of steps, one at a time, right? One step at a time, and just being aware that has got to be done in a process of slow evolution, not jumping into it. And if you do jump into it, you're likely to have a plunge pool reception into that, and that's fine. It's a quick learning curve. But
I think maybe if you're going to step very far out of your comfort zone, I think you've got to make sure you've got some money behind you.
Yeah.
Like don't go. You've got none of your own money and you're working with investors very early on, and you've not got any experience of doing big projects or refurbs. Don't go and do a commercial conversion, because that's where people get obliterated.
Yeah, taken out. I mean, even those who are very, very good at it still get obliterated, let alone people who don't have the knowledge and experience.
Yes.
It's too easy in that industry to get it wrong enough that you're out.
Yeah.
And no one wants that. That's not why we get into this,
no
right?
point.
It's the opposite of what we're trying to achieve. So, okay, let's move on to a different part of this, because I really want to talk about deal killers. In terms of banks and finance.
Love those guys.
Oh, they love to kill a deal. So I'm going to start from the aspect of the upfront. For me, understanding what the banks can do and will do is just so insanely important for the analysis stage.
And always changing.
Yeah, it's always changing. Basically, you need a broker who is not just experienced and knowledgeable, but willing to be able to give you some answers occasionally and check-ins and be like, where are we at now? What's the current rate? So that you are able to get those on a regular basis, because it's just always changing. The rates are always changing. What they're happy with are always changing. Even on simple buy-to-lets in a company, it could change whether someone will lend to you or not, or what the criteria are for whether they'll lend or not. I remember it was like overnight a few years ago where suddenly most lenders, 95% of lenders would no longer lend to people who owned properties in a company where that company was owned by another company. And it literally went from being able to access, if you were in that scenario, even with simple buy-to-lets, you went from being able to access 2.5% interest rates to like it had to be 4.6%. And that was overnight. It was like from a December 31st or the 1st of Jan, done. I could no longer access 2.5% on my buy-to-lets in the company. So just being aware of that, because that could literally destroy so many deals with unwittingly, where you've just analysed them all, you've started them all, you're buying them, and suddenly you can't get to those rates anymore, and you've got negative cash flowing properties.
And look, that is going to happen sometimes. Something will majorly change and you won't get a warning that's going to happen. But like, I think more often the consistent deal killer is people just making assumptions about what they can do on the lending front. And, you know, the thing is, say you've seen a speaker at a networking event and they've presented a deal and how they funded it. You know, inevitably that's going to have been a year, 2, 3 years ago that deal will be from. The products that were available then are probably not available now. So at the very least, make sure that you are analysing your deals based on the loan to values, rates and overall cost of that product, because it can take it from being like, oh yeah, no, I can get, at one point you get 85% loan to value quite easily on stuff, and now probably you could be at 65% on some of those, and that totally changes the game.
Yeah, I think it's the same thing, isn't it? Just you've got to have a line to your broker and do not assume anything. I think every time I start a new refinance period, every time I'm coming up to my next refinance, or in fact every time I start a new deal purchase, I will be on the phone to him going, okay, so this is the plan. I'm going for the 75% on this. Is that going to be fine at the moment? Are they happy with that?
And inevitably what I hear like next is, oh really? Oh gosh, that's changed. Oh okay. That is always the answer when I hear you talking.
What did we have recently? Blocks of flats, where one of our blocks is 11 flats in the block, and it felt like overnight our lender decided they would no longer do the same product for any blocks above 10 flats. And we jumped from 5.9% interest rate up to 6.74% just because of one extra flat in the block. And it's like, what
the hell?
What's going on here? And that's the problem, is it's just always shifting and changing on what they're happy with, what they're not happy with, and it's just being on top of that. So when you're doing your analysis, you're as up to date as possible, and you don't find yourself unwittingly in an uncomfortable position.
Yes.
And similarly, bridging finance.
Yes, let's talk about bridging fees and stuff, shall we?
I think a big deal killer, an unwitting one. So we're now talking about, you've done your analysis, you're getting into the deal and you're now doing it, you're purchasing it, and things start to not look as good as they did on the paper up front. And this is definitely,
you're like, why?
This is definitely an area people miss, which is that bridging finance comes with so much extra faff and complexity to it that you need to be aware of, and what you're likely to be achieving. I think one of the ones is that people often miss is that the bridge in most cases are going to basically take 12 months of interest away from what they lend to you. So even though the broker says, yeah, don't worry, you'll get 75% loan to value on a bridge,
they'll even do 80.
Might do 80. What they in a goodly chunk of scenarios mean is, yes, they'll do 75% loan to value, and then before they lend you the money, they'll take off 12 months of interest, so you're actually going to be at more like 65%. And it actually, what is the end loan to value end up at is the real question. So that's the first one. And then they might even take off your arrangement fees as well. 2-3% arrangement fees will come off that as well. And suddenly we're at 62% loan to value before you even know it. And you might not have the investor finance ready for that level. So that's just one thing to be aware of.
That's not just a deal killer, that's a bank balance killer. Because I think unless you're being very diligent with how you're tracking all of these costs as they come through, because it's quite fluid as well, and you won't necessarily know exactly what you're going to get when you first apply, and the headlines are rarely what is the actual end result, you kind of end up not... You think you need a certain amount of money, but things progress, and unless you're tracking it, it starts up that you need 100 grand. But before you know it, it's actually come in at 120 grand when you put in all these other bits and pieces. Yep. And then you wonder why your bank balance is close to zero. And it won't make sense to you. And it's why people are like, where's the money, guys? Because actually what you've got in your analysis is not reflection of how it's ultimately panning out. Yeah. So that's why analysis is it's a fluid thing, right? It's not like a one day in time thing, always going back to it.
And I think that always going back to it and always double checking how much money the project actually needs versus what money you have available is key as well. Because those evolutions happen, and you just got to be immediately in there. Oh, I need 20k more. That's it. So I'm now at 460k required from investors or whatever the numbers are. So I think loan to value is whatever's on the page isn't necessarily what you're going to get is a key one. And again, really understanding how the product works. I mean, I would say 80% of the time, they take the interest off the loan for a
Yep.
bridge. But I've seen bridges come through past me from clients where they're like, oh no, I'm totally grilling them on these numbers, going, come on, interest got to be coming off the loan. And they'll say, no, it's not. I said, have you checked that with your broker? No, already I have. I said, send me the freaking paperwork, come on. And I get the paperwork, and it's some amazing bridge product where they haven't done that, and actually there's loads of other costs that haven't been taken off as well. And occasionally you get something like that. Limited time only, I would say, for sure. Like you said earlier, these products may be on the market for 6 months or 12 months, and then the lender changes their criteria, changes what they're offering. But I've had that before, and it's like, yes, you can find great products, but they're rarer. So I always do my bridging analysis always with the interest taken off the loan, as an assumption up front, and then if I happen to get the other product, woo, fabulous. Another one from bridges is development finance. If you're doing the development finance, that means you're taking on loan from a bank to cover the payment for the refurbishment of the property. And in this scenario, that bank is going to want to make sure that the project is going as expected, and they're going to want to give you your money in tranches.
Can I just say, as an aside, just don't do this unless you really, really have to do it, because I cannot think of one good example of when someone's been like, oh, it's been a dream to deal with. Like, it's always a nightmare. They don't release tranches when they say they will. They hold you to ransom. Like, it's an awful experience. I've never heard someone rave about it.
No, it's true. It's true. It's hard work. But this is the simple fact with it. Say you've got a 300k refurb. You've got borrowing that on development finance. Firstly, the bank are going to say, we're not going to give you the first bit of money. You need to input some of your money first. So immediately, you've got to remember, you're going to put in the first tranche, and it's probably going to be in a 300k. It's going to be in the region of 60 to 75k, that area. It will be what you'll have to input. So even though you're getting 300 grand of finance, you still need to have another 60k of that available from, say, investors or your own pot. And that's the starting point. And then you are going to have to pay for a bank surveyor to come round and inspect your property and your project every however often you want a tranche from them. So it all comes down to number of tranches, which is why I said 60, 75, because most people don't really want more than 4 visits from the bank, because it's a lot of effort. Every time you have a visit, you have to provide the schedule of works, you have to prove the invoices you've paid, you have to prove what's been done to date, and in theory that's a lot of administration, a lot of effort. So it's better to have less visits, but obviously the less visits you have, the bigger your first tranche is. So 75 grand assumes 4 visits out of a 300k build, and that's 4 visits. Every single time you're paying £600 for a man to visit.
Maybe more.
It could be more, and that is literally £2,400 you've got to make sure you've got accommodated for your project. So it's just all these costs. And I remember having a session recently with a guy who was saying, I could just use development finance, and we did all of the working out on it, and it was literally like, you either do the development finance or you just go to investors. And if you go to investors, he would have been it was something like on 160k of lending, he was going to be 20k better off out the other side. If he'd have just found investors for the stuff instead. It's just not worth it. Like I agree with you, what you've just said. I use development finance in my mind as like the backup option.
Worst case scenario.
Absolute worst case scenario. I can't find the investment. The investors just aren't there for whatever reason.
Yeah.
Or it's just someone's pulled out and I'm like, crap, I just really need to get this done.
Yeah.
I will then talk to the broker about my options in that area. But it is a faff.
Yeah.
It's hard work. And it's not as good as working with private investors.
Yeah.
As an option.
Yeah, and I think none of that, you don't really see that when it's put across to you. It's like, 75% to loan to value, and we'll do all the development finance. It's just like, they don't go, and this is going to be a right pain in your ass for the next 9 months, basically.
And I'd say those costs, those extra costs, and all of that adds up to the point that often people, if they haven't done their maths up front well enough or analysis, that can kill your deal. It can leave you little profit.
Well, I think the general area of finance costs, I would say, is probably one of the biggest deal killers. Not up front, because people don't generally do good enough analysis and realise, but over the course of a deal, I think it's one of the biggest deal killers, it actually being good, because actually once you put in the arrangement fees, the stupid surveyor's visits, the ridiculous amount of arrangement solicitors fees they want to charge you, when you put it all in, it's huge. It is not 1% a month to get a bridge. No, that's a lie.
Right.
I think that being... And that's why asking more questions up front is good. Going through the paperwork, as boring as it may be, to make sure you truly understand what you're going to get.
Yeah.
So what should we talk about next? Should we talk about focusing on the wrong metrics?
Yeah, I think this is a really good one, because I think this is an area that if you, again, for me, it always comes back to the numbers. We're in an investment game and I'm a detail guy. So for me, it's about the analyzer. But regardless of how you do this, there are two very clear sides to a portfolio that you're holding. And when you get to the end of a project and you refinance, you've got the money coming out. So therefore, how much money is left in the deal? And is it an all money out deal? That's one side. I call that the project side, or the capital side, capital play. And then you've got the other side, which is how much cash flow am I making? How much money will I end up with every month from the rents, from the income? And the problem is, in theory, the more money you release from a deal, the more you're borrowing against that property. The more you borrow against the property, the higher your interest costs are. The higher your interest costs are, the lower your net profits are on the cash flow. So they are literally directly opposite each other, affecting each other, opposing forces, which means that if you get to an all money out deal, quite often
the cash flow is terrible.
The cash flow is terrible, exactly. Especially with interest rates where they are at the moment, right? So this balance of how much money you withdraw versus how much your cash flow is out the other side is so important.
If someone says to me, I want all money out, high cash flowing deals, I say, see you later. Because I'm like, you've not looked at an analyzer. Those two things are mutually exclusive.
Mutually exclusive. So for me, it's a balancing act of knowing how much cash flow I want from a deal and how much it's going to make me versus how much I'm trying to release and how strong the money held in is returning. And getting that right is key to a deal working and not dying.
Because also, like, the pound note number of cash flow is very different to a percentage return on investment on the money held in. Yeah. And you're right, like a high a profit with great uplift on capital is going to mean that you can release a lot of money, probably on refinance, which will mean you won't have much held in, which will mean the return on capital could be incredibly high, but you could be making on a single let like 25 quid a month or something, like totally unviable.
So this is where the deal killer is if you've only looked at one of those metrics, if you've only looked at your money held in the deal because you're just saying, I want all money out deals, that's all I'm interested in, or if there's any money held in my deals, I want it to return really, really high, right? And that's all you're focused on, but you don't notice the cash flow well enough, you end up with a deal that A, might just not be very profitable regardless on a money basis, so it's not really worth all the effort, or B, cannot weather the problems you can't foresee. So a good example of that is the problem you can't foresee is interest rates being higher. You know, something happens, like with the Liz Truss budget a couple of years ago, you just suddenly overnight, your interest rate rises from what you were expecting, 4%, up to like 5%, and you haven't got enough cash flow in your deal to weather that problem. And suddenly you've now got a dud deal rather than a fantastic deal that you thought it was, all because you didn't allow for that cash flow. So it's just balancing that act is so key.
And I think, like, for us, it's been on we've had some deals that have come to us in the past that we've just been so excited about. Like, God, we're like, oh, buying it at that, refinance at that, that's a cracker, Dave. And, you know, some stuff we've been really excited about, particularly in some of the slightly nicer areas, I would say, as well. Then we both got very excited, and then you sit down with the spreadsheet and you're like, but it doesn't work. It doesn't cash flow. And it's so hard to comprehend because you just look at the high level numbers in your mind at first, but when you get into the detail, it's mind-boggling. And I think we have played around with leaving slightly more money in some deals in order to balance that out, where you get the balance point of enough return on capital, enough cash flow, but enough money released. It's that optimization, right?
That's it, optimization. And I guess with the optimization, there also has to be flexibility for what you can do out the other end as well, because in terms of what we're dealing with an industry where the banks at any time, a valuer or a bank can reduce how much they'll lend just by choice or whatever. You just don't know what's going to happen. So every deal has to be able to weather the chance of a down valuation, more money being held in. So you might be only going after all money out deals, thinking, well, I don't need to worry about investor money long term because it's all money out deals. And then you get down valued a couple of times and you've got
100 grand left in.
100 grand left in.
Yeah.
And actually you have to know that that's a possibility at any moment. And that if you have to leave money in the deal, that's got to come from somewhere. So that's the first thing, being aware that that's part of your investment process, is ensuring you're lining up potential funds for longer term. But then, can the deal afford to pay the higher interest rate that you have to pay to an investor? And the way I look at it is like I'm looking at my bank finance at, say, 5.8%, and I say, okay, well, imagine they downvalue me to 65% loan to value. how much investor finance would that be? And if I had to pay that investor finance at 10%, can I still cash flow? And that's it. And it might not be the great cash flow I'm looking for. It might be lower, but that's what I talk about, having enough cash flow to weather problems. Because now we can weather having to leave more investor finance in than planned and being able to pay 10% on that finance.
Can we just do a slight cul-de-sac on this to talk about lenders being happy with investors? Because I think some lenders, you could end up in that situation where a bank would not be happy for an investor to be involved, whereas others would be. Maybe just a slight side note on that.
Yes, I guess. It's very hard though, because it's just
Maybe
that's
that's
always changing.
Maybe that's it. That's just the side note to say, like, being strategic about, if you're going to work with investors, making sure you've got banks that understand that. Like, don't go to the mortgage works. They don't get it. They even exist still?
The mortgage works. Yeah, I think they do.
Okay, they don't like investors. But some of the more commercial ones, they get it, right? So just making sure that that's part of the overall picture, and maybe something to consider even if you're not necessarily wanting to work with investors. Maybe that might end up panning out, and maybe it's worth paying a higher interest rate to work with a bank that gets it rather than one that doesn't.
Yeah.
Sorry, the mortgage works. Just totally bitching about you there.
No, I think what I want to move on to now is the refurb. As a concept, the refurb is one of these areas that people can be a bit too conservative on, but then there's also some other people that are way too slapdash and happy-go-lucky with their numbers. So the first thing I would say is that realism is key, and having always a certain amount of contingency just in your numbers at all times. So you go for a very real refurb, because that's one of the things where people are too conservative. They say, oh well, I just wanted to accommodate anything that could happen, so I've allowed 50k for a refurb of a 2-bed flat, and I'm like, it's way too much. What the hell have you included? Oh well, I thought just in case I might need to do a rewire, and just in case I might need to replace the boiler, and just in case I might need to do whatever. So it's not a just-in-case scenario with refurb. For me, it's you've got to have viewed the property, you've got to look at it with keen eyes and actually make an assessment of each thing and say, okay, what am I likely to have to do here? Likely being the key word. And then you choose a refurb amount that is the correct likely amount, and then we have a contingency. We have a 10 or 20% contingency allowance for the unknown, for the things that you haven't managed to think of, right?
Yes, and those don't have to be your eyes, someone's eyes, documenting it.
Yeah.
And I think also then, I think some ways that we've managed to make deals work that were borderline has been saying, what is actually required for this refurb? Does it need a whole new bathroom? Is that kitchen actually all right? Like, let's optimise where exactly we put our budget to... It's the 80-20 principle of refurbs, right? Where can you spend the money that it has the most capital uplift, and where are you wasting money on pretty taps or something? I don't know. Exactly
right. And I'd say that's a deal killer both up front and later down the line. Two different parts. So both are up front. We have a simple methodology, which is first analysis is done on basis of a full refurb. Fully done. So that would be the ideal scenario, that I've got enough money in my analysis that I know I can do everything. Then second analysis, if I think I'm close and I'm like, I just wouldn't have to spend a bit less and I can make this deal work and get to the margins, I then do a full analysis of the property and I say, okay, could we get away without that? Could we get away without this? I remember we've got a property in southeast London, right?
Which one?
82C.
Okay.
And 82C, we just did it. We've owned it for 10 years now? 9 years? 10 years? We never replaced the kitchen up front or the bathroom. We got away with both of those.
Yeah.
We got away with and yet that was a 1-bed flat we converted to a 2-bed flat. So we got away with, we got a lot of uplift from that, but we managed to reduce the refurb to nothing because it wasn't working.
It was our best ever deal.
It was our best ever deal. And we didn't do the kitchen, we didn't do the bathroom. Here we are almost 10 years later and we've just had a tenant leave and we've replaced the kitchen. Okay, and I was talking to the refurb, their builder on the phone going, can we get away with it? Could you just do the cupboards? And he was like, no, I really think it's really
time.
It's really shit. So we did the kitchen, but the tiles in the bathroom are still the original ones. And they look great. And I literally, every time we do this, I'll get the builder to send the photos. I'm looking at it. I'm going, can we get away? No, it's definitely going to get the rents we're looking for with those tiles. So just leave those alone. And it works. And I would do that with a analysis up front. I'm trying to squeeze the numbers. I'll see how can I optimize my refurb spec to get it to work in a realistic fashion.
Yep.
It is that question of which things make the difference to me achieving both the valuation and the rents I'm trying to achieve, which things won't make that difference, and optimizing it with that in mind. And the same thing happens later down the line. You're in the middle of your refurb, you're suddenly finding that the builder's quote is going up, something unexpected has happened, you need to replace the roof and you hadn't planned on it. Whatever it might be, there comes a moment where you should definitely be in there optimizing your spec, changing things, adjusting what you're doing and saying, crap, I know I wanted to spend 50k on this, but actually I need it to come down to 40 or 35. So how can we do this? And doing that moment of real deep thinking, deep digging into everything, every decision made.
And this is a slightly off the point a little bit, but it's almost like a later down the line thing, I would say generally. But just this idea of like when you make decisions about when you put money into a property, like particularly us on like maybe, second, third, fourth refinances that we're getting to with some of them, how do you decide what you put money into doing and what you don't? And like I think it's the kind of approach that we've come to, like being able to, if you can change the bathroom and that'll mean you get another £100 a month rent for it, how long is it going to take you to recoup that money back? Yeah. And therefore is it worth doing it? And I don't think we've landed on an exact figure, but if we can get that back within like 2 years, that generally is something that we would consider doing, right?
Yeah, that is our methodology. We always say, how much is it going to cost? How much extra rent will it get us? And therefore, how quickly do we recoup the money? And then we make our decision. Well, all we haven't decided on is the amount of time we want to recoup our money and buy. Yeah. And that actually changes based on how much, do we have lots of capital available? If we have lots of cash available, then I'm happy to wait 2 years for my money back. But if there's not a lot of cash and it's going to be a bit more of a squeeze and we've got to find the money, then maybe I want it back within 12 months. So it's that decision does adjust. But you're right, just what actual difference is going to make to me. And it could be the valuation. It could be if there's a valuation coming up pretty soon, then maybe it's worth doing because I'm like, okay, I know I'm not going to necessarily recoup it quickly from the rent, but actually I know I'll be able to get it out of the next valuation. So it's just a holistic approach to when's that money going to come back to me that's worthwhile putting that in. Because quite often there's lots of tenants out there who would rather have a cheaper flat with a slightly
average kitchen,
right? And so you still have a market available to you. So yeah, in that 5, 10, 15 year mark of having owned the property for a while, there is some good analysis to be done there to work out what's worthwhile doing.
Nice. So what's your final thoughts then? So thinking about, let's come back to the start. So this was like, where do people kill their deals when it comes to either upfront the decisions that are made either one way, like to not do it, or subsequently where things go wrong in terms of the whole deal is taking place and things are not panning out as we thought? What's the killer point that you would want someone to take away? The killer point about deal killing. A lot of killing going on.
I think it's 2 aspects. Number 1 is your upfront analysis must be realistic, not pessimistic. That's most important to not killing the deal up front. And realistic but detailed, it's got to have all the aspects, but all aspects realistically done. And within that realistic, you've got to make sure you've got a very clear, updated market feedback on aspects like brokers and finance and all these things that feed into your analysis. They've got to be up to date. So just making sure you've got that point of contact with the people who can help in those areas and make sure you're not just going off what someone said from a networking event a year ago. So that side is just realistic and accurate. And those 2 things together mean that you're A, not going to be too pessimistic and kill the deals because of that, but B, also not set yourself up for failure by missing stuff. And then down the line, I would say just allowing within your planning, just allowing for things that could go wrong in terms of your options, and that doesn't mean that something goes wrong. And if something goes wrong, it doesn't mean you're going to end up with the same deal, but you've got to be able to weather the problem. So I think where people go wrong with their analysis up front is they say, well, I've got to be able to have a great deal, even if everything goes wrong. That's foolish. If everything goes wrong, you're not going to have a good deal. That's how it is. But we need to be able to weather things going wrong and not have a deal that's losing us money. So just having plans for that, whether it's through having ready investment available or knowing the deal can have enough cash flow to cover extra costs, these are the things we need to be thinking about. Just to know, worst case scenario, we're still going to be, washing our face or profitable. I think, and maybe the last thing to say is just constantly when your project is going, just being in there and always thinking back to the numbers. Don't just get in there and start just getting into the zone of like, well, we've got to make it look good. It's got to be good for the tenants. I really want the design to be great. Like these are all nice thoughts. But in the end, it all comes back to numbers and returns. That's what we're in. It's a business of investment. So every decision should come back to the numbers, and decisions should be based on is it going to return for me in some way or another? How quickly am I going to recoup the money? How does it fit within the investment as a whole? Not just based on the emotion of I want it to look great, or I really don't want to miss out on that thing. It's got to come back to numbers.
Well, there you go, guys. Detail Dave has spoken. That's how to make sure you don't kill your deals. Oh, that was somehow just really cathartic to record. Really loved that. I hope you did too. If you want to find out more about what we do and how we can work together, go and check out our website, and that is property-strategy.com. And if you're looking for help to raise finance and do more deals, if you're an experienced investor looking for that advisory support, check out our 12-month accelerator program, which is called Dealmaker Accelerator, and you can find that at our website, www.property-strategy.com/DMA. Next week, we'll be back with another episode on Friday. You'll be joined by Dom and Dave with another fantastic topic about creating the life that you want through property. So until then, have a fantastic week ahead.